So if you've watched a lot of my videos, then you probably know that I really like small fidget spinners. And in fact, as I've used them more over time, I've started to gravitate more and more towards smaller spinners. So I just wanted to do my favorite small or micro or nano, whatever you want to call it, fidget spinner of June 2017. Here's the range right now. This is most of what I have in the smaller size, although there's some concern or some question over what's a small spinner and what's not. This is a standard fidget spinner, and when I think of small, I'm thinking of something you can use discreetly in the office or when you're commuting, that you could put in a pocket or just that people around you aren't going to be overly aware of. Generally that means something quiet, but it doesn't have to. This is really going to focus on the size, and then the quietness is up to you. Again, here's a standard fidget spinner. Here's something small like the Yardworks Dad, or the tank or Kong, or sorry, the tank or the Secret Service or the Fidgeteer, whatever you want to call this thing. Anyway, so now let's run through them, and I'll give you my favorites, just with the caveat that all of these are really solid spinners. I just prefer some over others. First off, we have the Yardworks Dad in brass. I still have the 608 bearing in this. I really like this spinner. It's one of my favorites, and it's the one I grab the most. I'm gonna throw it out of the running right now just because I know a lot of people don't like the 608. That 608 bearing is pretty loud, so this is not particularly discreet. Even though I really like it, it's not ideal for everyone. I do have the Yardworks Dad in steel. That's the raw steel that I converted to an R188 bearing. This thing will spin for like, I don't know, 4 minutes or something like that, and it's very quiet. I think this is a really great spinner, but again, I'm gonna throw it out of the running because to get something like this, you have to get a Yardworks, and then you have to get a converter, then you have to do all the work to pop the bearing out and put this in. So you're looking at something like $50 and manual labor just to get this done out of the running. Here we have the Vorso flat top. I really like this spinner. It's a 608 spinner, old school design. Pretty expensive, and I really like this one a lot, and I grab it a lot, but just because it is so expensive and sooner or later they're going to come out with a V2, I would not recommend people went ahead and buy these unless you could find one used and get a good deal like I did. But I would not recommend going out and spending like $150 on this, even though it is a really cool and gratifying fidget spinner. Moving on, here we have, this one has a lot of names. I bought it as the Fidgeteer. It's also called the Bar. This is a really great R188 spinner. You can get it for about maybe $24, depending on where you get it. Really discreet, really small. I switched it over to these buttons, so I think it looks pretty classy. Really quiet, it'll spin really well. But keep this in, I really highly recommend that spinner. Whether it's the Bar or the Secret Service or the Fidgeteer, whatever you get it as. And here we have this little try spinner. This is called the Zeny Try, I believe. I'll link to it in the notes below, just so you know exactly what it is. Another great spinner, really small, perhaps a little too small. I find myself, like, just my hand gets a little cramped up using this thing. I don't have huge hands or anything like that, but you're really keeping your hand tight all day long. So whereas this used to be one of my favorite spinners, I find myself not really using it very often lately, because it's just a little too small for me. Here we have a NeoSpin R188 adapter with a silicone band around it. I know some people use tungsten bands and glue them in place. I didn't want to get this thing all messy with adhesive or epoxy, whatever, so I just put this ring around it. I actually don't ever carry this. I thought it would be cool to have, but I don't really find it to be a very gratifying spinner to use. Yeah, it does spins. Yeah, I can put it in my pocket, and yeah, it's small, but not really my favorite to use. Here we have the Ginko Titanium spinner from Amazon. Sells for about $28, $29. It is actually titanium with brass buttons and has a little bearing in it, a little 623 bearing, so it's really small. This thing can get a pretty good spin, over a minute, no problem, and it's silent. So I like this one actually more than I expected. I'm not usually into gear spinners or like circle spinners like this outside of the Yardworks Dad. But I do tend to grab this one. I think it's actually a pretty nice choice for a small spinner. Lastly, we have the newest spinner I have, or one of the newest ones. This is called the Sentry Nano, and it's kind of like a tiny version of the C3, which is itself a pretty small spinner. This is even smaller. Sells for about $27. I bought this one from Fidget HQ. Again, yeah, $27. It's a pretty nice little spinner. R18 bearing. I bought it in stainless steel. You could also get it in copper, brass, and I believe it will eventually be sold in a titanium. Yeah, it will. But it's going to go up to $65 for the titanium. It's a lot for a little spinner, but you know, to each his own. I was happy to pick it up in the stainless. So I would say these three right now are my favorite mini spinners. So I could leave it at that. But if I had to pick out one to use, I would go with this, the Fidgeteer or the the Fidgeteer or the Secret Service or the bar, depending on where you get it. This is just the one I go for and I gravitate towards. I have a bearing in there, so it's an R188 bearing, and I moved away from a really smooth one. I got kind of a cheaper bearing, so I get a little bit more feedback. Not quite this much, but more so than a really high-end bearing. I found that I like to hear that ringing a little bit. I like to feel it spinning. This thing's really simple, but it has a nice weight to it. These other two, again, really solid choices, and I could see if you want a really good flick or you want a really long desk spin, this Zeny Try is really solid, especially for $27. It's just a nice spinner. This titanium one is cool. This is titanium, but I generally find it to be less gratifying than the others. So these are my top mini spinners for June 2017, with my favorite one remaining this Fidgeteer. Please leave some comments below with your favorites, and thanks for watching.